All right, so hello and welcome. My name is Katie Tremulis. I'm the owner of Notary SWFL. And today I have my dear friend Jay Sarin here. He is with Jay Signing Services. So I wanted to have him on to talk about his business and then also a very important subject of looking for fraud within the elderly. So thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
Could you tell me a little bit about your business, what made you start, and how long you've been in business for?
I've been a notary now for probably about 7 years total. I was a notary in the state of New Hampshire for a couple of years when I lived up there. Then I moved down to Virginia for a while and I gave it up. And then I became a Florida notary when I bought my house down there just right before the COVID pandemic hit. And so I saw an increase of, I became a remote notarization fairly quickly with COVID. And so I did that for a while, and then I moved I actually purchased the house and moved out to Virginia, and now I'm a Virginia notary, and I've been doing that for the last year. I do a lot of remote notarizations, especially doing estate planning, wills, trusts, healthcare surrogacies, those types of documents for several different law firms in Florida. I have one in Arizona and one in Texas that I do for. So I've got a strong background in doing estate planning. And a lot of estate plans, usually the people that do those types of documents are your elderly people. They're getting up there in age or retirement. They're trying to figure out what to do with their assets when they pass, or if they're unable to make their own decisions for themselves. Either the children are going to make the decisions for them, or their spouses, and so forth. So I really a good background in healthcare.
Previously, you also had experience with healthcare and everything like that. Can you go into what you
Sure.
did in another life or
Yeah.
yeah.
Since the age of 16, I became an emergency medical technician, and I've worked in various different capacities, probably close to 3 decades now, so close to 30 years. I've been an EMS instructor. I was riding on an ambulance doing rescue since probably about 16 and a half. And what came out during that time frame, there was no such thing as HIPAA, when I first started. Which is the Healthcare Portability Act, which I'll get into a little bit about that and some misconceptions about that as well shortly. I've been a deputy sheriff for 10 years, and I currently am a volunteer firefighter, and I've been doing that for quite some time now, too. So I have a lot of background in dealing with the elderly and mental capacities and so forth like this, which kind of plays into when we're doing notarization. I don't think that the notary world, so to speak, puts enough emphasis on it. We are supposed to make sure that the people that are signing are in a correct mental state in order to sign these documents, basically understanding what it is that they are signing. And unfortunately, I've been on mobile notarizations myself and remote notarizations where the person being asked to sign I feel is kind of being manipulated maybe by a son or daughter and so forth that wanted them to sign, but they didn't have the mental capacity to do it. And I've personally walked away from jobs because I didn't feel comfortable doing it. Because the last thing you want is, our most vulnerable, our children, but then it's also our seniors and making sure that they're not being taken advantage of. So I think with my background in EMS and as a deputy sheriff and the things that I've seen and the types of questions look asked for and what you can and can't do, just makes you a better notary and helps protect these vulnerable people that we deal with.
And so, do you have like the specific advice for someone that's just starting out, like that think that this is just, I agree. I think a common misconception is that this can be like a cash making vehicle for a career, which, you obviously do get paid for doing what it is that you're notarizing, but at the same time, there is a good,
You have a moral and ethical obligation in
yes,
doing it.
yes.
And we can also address a little bit, when you come into these certain situations, how you can handle it, what type of advice. I mean, we're not attorneys, so we can't give them legal advice, but we can kind of guide, a family member a little bit in the direction they should go. They should seek an attorney. If we don't feel comfortable signing, tell the son or the daughter or whoever it is that's if they're upset about this not being done, tell them to seek the advice of an attorney. They
Mhm.
can petition the courts. They can go to the courts and have, bring paperwork into the courts to determine the mental capacity of the signer and maybe get a judge to issue the order in favor of what it is that they're trying to get notarized, whether it's a power of attorney, a distribution of assets, whatever it might be. A judge might be a good avenue. We can't give them legal advice, but we can kind of like guide them a little bit and, consult with an attorney or consult with a judge.
Yeah. And so when you went into that hospice and you decided that you weren't going to do the notarization, what were some of the signs that you looked for, or that you saw that made you decide that that wasn't something that's within the scope of being a notary?
So there's two aspects of this. There's the mobile notarization part and the remote notarization part. And Florida kind of did something good with the remote side of it because they have under Chapter 117, which is the notary rule, they actually have a specific area for dealing with vulnerable adults. And there's actually three questions when you do a remote notarization that have to be asked. On the mobile side of things, there really isn't any guidance except we need to make sure that they're in the right state of mind to do this. When you walk into a nursing home, some things, are you walking into a memory care unit? Is this somebody that's in a dementia unit? Or are they somebody that has full-time care? Some nursing homes too, they have like assisted living areas where people they don't really need full attention, the day to day. Maybe they just have somebody grab the paper for them or just help them out and so forth because they still have that mental capacity to make decisions. So kind of be looking at where you're going into, what areas. If you're going to a hospital assignment, are you going into the intensive care unit? Are you going into a cardiothoracic area where people are like really hurt or injured? Or are you going into like an ambulatory room where somebody just had maybe might be going in for like a day surgery and they're 40 years old and otherwise you're doing good. Um, One common misconception with HIPAA is everybody's like, well, you can't ask medical questions. It's a HIPAA violation. It's a HIPAA violation. So one of the things I want to clarify with HIPAA is HIPAA doesn't apply to the general public. So if you ask, if there's family members in there and you want to ask them about the medical health of the patient that's sitting in there and they want to engage in conversation with you, there is no violation of HIPAA. The only time that HIPAA applies is under three situations. HMOs, insurance companies can't divulge patient health information to anybody that's not the patient or without the patient's authorization. Healthcare providers can't. So anybody that's working in the nursing home, what's a doctor, nurse, medical aide, somebody like that, they can't talk about the patient's medical information with you unless the patient authorized it. And then the other is healthcare clearinghouses, which are basically entities that clean health information. So if it's anybody that's not one of those three things that I just listed right now, they can freely talk about the person's medical. Now, whether how in depth they should get with you and so forth is another story. You don't need to go into full detail. But if I'm in there and and the daughter's in there and I say, okay, what are they in here for? Well, they've got dementia. Or why are they here? Talk to the patient too. Introduce yourself to the patient or the signer, I should say, and ask them questions. Do you know where you are? Do you know the day of the month? Do you know who the president of the United States is? Nothing too crazy. Do you know what healthcare facility in? If they can answer these questions and they're pretty spot on with it, chances are that they're pretty lucid and they understand what's going on. Then you can start asking them questions about the document themselves. Do you know what you're signing? Do you know what this is? Do you know what you're giving them, what this person is giving permission to do? If they're able to answer these questions, then chances are you're good. If you're asking the questions and the sibling is in there answering the questions for you and not giving them the chance to answer, you need to start looking at this a little bit heavier. It's like talk to them, say I understand that you know this, but I'm asking them and I need them to respond back to me. And make sure that they're answering the questions they ask. The notary's job is to notarize signatures, and I get it. And we're not supposed to go into reading the documents or finding out what they're signing. And I joke around sometimes too. Some people are like, "Can I do this notarization?" I'm like, it doesn't matter if they're writing a letter saying Santa Claus is real.
Mm-hmm.
Your job is to notarize the signature. But in the same aspect too, your job is also to make sure that the person that you're notarizing understands what they're signing and asking questions to help you make a informed decision with yourself that that's what they're doing is what you need to do. Then go ahead and do that. And if there's any doubt in your mind, then just go and walk out the door and do not do the notarization. Maybe it'll come back to you, and if you do it might not come back to you. It might, but why do you want to put yourself in this situation? Why do you want to take advantage of this poor person who doesn't understand what they're signing to? I mean, like I said, going back earlier, moral and ethical. Do what's right. It's not worth it to me for the $55, $60 to do one notarization and completely ruin this person's life when they're in the most worst possible position they could be in, at the end of their life or whatever they're going through. It's not worth it.
Yeah, I've been in a situation where I was in a finance job, where I saw the end of that, where a family member had become a power of attorney and controlled the assets of someone that was in that type of situation, and they completely drained the accounts to the where the person couldn't afford care anymore. And so that is a terrible thing. You don't know the areas surrounding that, but that is what you're protecting against as a notary, just to make sure that that person knows what they're doing when they are transferring assets or doing the estate planning. Like they're with it, so that way they know,
And the thing is too is even if you think about it outside of notarization, when I was a deputy sheriff 10 years, I several times a week I got a call for somebody that was a victim of fraud.
Mhm.
And majority of the time it was an elderly person. They got a text message asking for money. Somebody called up on the phone and said, they had a warrant for the arrest. And the crazy things is sometimes they'd ask for like Apple gift cards or Amazon gift cards. And these people literally legitimately thought that this
Mhm.
was a real thing and they would go down to a local Walmart and buy these. They weren't raised in like the technology area that we are as younger individuals raised with iPhones and so forth like that. My mom and dad are in their 70s and they always call me up on the phone, I got a toll text message that I owe a toll bill and so forth. I'm like, it's fraud, don't deal with it, just delete it, get rid of it. So they don't understand a lot of times the stuff that we as younger people understand with fraud and so forth, and they get taken advantage of all the time. So that's why you need to really watch what you're doing and making sure that you're doing the right thing.
Correct. And then, so I also wanted to touch on the point that you said that there's a difference between in person and then remote.
Yep.
Do you have advice for detecting fraud or making sure that everything is above board for the remote aspects of doing
So
notarizations?
again, Florida specifically, I kind of like what they did here, and I'm actually going to refer to a specific statute, and I'm going to kind of embellish on this a little bit from my background. Again, I'm not an attorney. I'm not giving you legal advice. You should, look at these statutes yourself, make your own interpretation of it, speak to your own attorney, and get their understanding of it. From the attorneys that I spoke with, the ones that I work with on a daily basis, we seem to be on the same page and I have a pretty good understanding, but again, you should research this on your own. But the Florida statute for supervising the witnessing of electronic records for Florida, for example, it's chapter 117.285. It's a specific statute. And there could be other states, I'm not aware of any, that might have something along these lines as well. But this is specifically dealing with remote notarizations for vulnerable adults. That's what the statute is for. And what it is there's three questions that need to be asked at the beginning of the notarization that the signer must answer yes or no to. And when these questions are asked, is if you're doing a remote notarization of a will, you're doing a trust with testamentary aspects. Now, what a testamentary aspect is anything that's dealing with a trust where there's a beneficiary age restrictions, asset protections, staggered distributions, incapacity planning. So basically, anything that is going to deal with like end of life distribution of assets of a trust, a revocable trust, you need to have these questions asked. There's also for advanced healthcare directives. Those are basically if somebody is medically incapacitated state, such as in a vegetative state, they're a end of life for cancer or on hospice. They'll have these advanced care directives that basically says what types of medical treatment they want. You need to ask these three questions in the beginning. Waiver of spousal rights is another one, and then the final one is any power of attorney that authorizes a transaction enumerated. So basically, any type of power of attorney that deals with money, these questions need to be asked. And basically, what the three questions are, and they're yes or no questions, is are you under the influence of any drug or alcohol today that impairs your ability to make your decisions? Do you have any physical or mental condition or long-term disability that impairs your ability to perform the normal activities of daily living? And then finally, do you require assistance with daily care? And if they answer yes to any of those questions, they're considered a vulnerable adult under that statute. What this means is they can still technically do a remote notarization, but the witnesses cannot be remote from them. The witnesses have to be physically located with them. So, for example, your mom is doing a trust and she has two friends of hers that are in a different state and they're remote, and your mom answers yes to these questions. You have to stop the remote notarization right there, and those witnesses need to go to wherever your mom is and be physically located in the same room with her as she's signing this document. Again, though, don't go to that step though, even if they have these issues, because some people do have needs that they need, like, daily care, because they might have mobility issues. Just because they have mobility issues doesn't mean they don't have the mental capacity to sign it. But under Florida's Vulnerable Adult Act, they have to have the witnesses physically located with them. And then after that case, if they do have them there, when they come back to it down the road, then there's more questions that have to be asked.
Mhm.
I've never ran into a vulnerable adult remote online yet that answered yes to any questions. But if it did, then the questions are they currently married? If so, they have to name who their spouse is. They have to state the name of anyone who assisted them in accessing the video conference. Please state any names of anyone who assisted you in preparing the documents you're signing. Where are they located? Who was in the room with you? So these questions are an additional if you come back to it at a later time to do the remote notarizations. But again, do your due diligence. We all are required, every single state's required to either do KBA or biometrics in the beginning. You need to be checking the ID. You need to make sure it met as. We always, I've been on notarizations with Katie. Her and I pretty much say the same things when we start off remote notarizations. We introduce ourselves. We ask them if it's okay if we do the remote notarization. We ask them, do they understand the document that they're signing? Are they signing the document of their free will? Nobody's coercing them to sign it. Do they understand that they're bound by the terms of that document? And then finally, we usually end it with is being audio and video recorded, and we ask to see their ID so we can compare it to theirs. So if you get into this routine with asking the same things over and over and over again, or having a little script and planning this ahead of time, you're protecting yourself, you're protecting the signer, and you're protecting any fallout that could happen. With the attorneys that I've worked with, I follow remote notarization to a T. I don't want them to come back to me. I don't want my E&O, my errors and omissions being hit. I don't want my liability being hit. Some states for remote notarization, Virginia is one of them, doesn't require insurance for notaries. You can put in for your notarization and get your remote notarization. So if you don't have liability E&O, you should get it. Florida requires it, 25,000 minimum for both if you're a remote notarization. Virginia doesn't. But if your state doesn't, at least get that protected, especially if you start getting into these types of notarizations. If you're doing general notary work, notarizing a letter or something like that, maybe you don't need all the insurance. But if you start getting into doing home closings remotely, wills and estates, start looking at getting those $500,000, $1 million protection policies to protect yourself.
And in general, so there's two different ways that you can look for the errors and omissions insurance and liability. So two of the most major ones that anyone wants to look at is either BIBERC or through the NNA. I have BIBERC, and just so that way you guys have like a little bit of a but budgeting. So for mine, it's $1 million policy and it's about $40 to $50 a month. So
Mhm.
it's definitely worth it for peace of mind and then also to protect clients. It also helps and is a little bit more attractive to potential clients when you're like, no, I have this amount of insurance because I take my business seriously. So it does make a little bit of a difference.
I want to circle back to one thing real quickly.
Okay.
Just it just clicked on me when we're doing these mobile notarizations and we walk in. So we walk into a situation, we determine that the signer doesn't have the mental capacity to sign.
Hmm.
Um, I've had this personally happen. I've had a lot of ticked off family members
Yeah.
because they wouldn't sign, and
Yeah.
they basically would try and say anything. Come on, they can sign this. They know what they're doing. They're feeling under the weather today. They're normally not like this. That I
Yeah.
spoke to them an hour ago, and they were okay with this. Do not fall for it. Do not get into it with them. If you don't feel comfortable signing, don't believe that they know what they're signing. Do not sign it, no matter what the family member tries to do. Slip your money under the table, whatever it is. Do not do it, and they will try everything. And don't feel bad about walking away from it. Like I said, you will feel 10 times better with yourself inside that you didn't do it than to, God forbid, sign it and then find out that they were taken advantage of down the road.
Yeah, because and I know that like if you're a brand new notary and you're like, wow, that sounds crazy. That also happened to me where I was sitting at a table and I was talking to the person that was supposed to be signing. They were elderly. Went over and I was like, when you're going in and it is a mobile or in person, like I chit chat a little bit and I kind of read the room. So if that person is being like extra quiet or, seems very confused, I'm like, okay, well, how's your day going so far? Like, what's going on? What's new? Like, okay, like I need you to describe the document for me. And then if they're like, well, what is this? And I'm like, okay. So if that does happen, I've been in situations where people want to look over the document beforehand. I'm fine with having them go over it because sometimes
Oh,
they're like,
absolutely.
I don't know. And I'm like, all right, well, let's you find out. Go ahead and read through the document. My job is to make sure that you feel comfortable. And so, sometimes it's a thing of reviewing it, and then they're like, okay, it's a blah blah blah. It's a power of attorney. My kid needs to be able to do my medication or something.
And I don't think too, along with what you're saying is I don't think it's a bad thing too that if you need to read it to them, you shouldn't get into interpreting it for them, or if they don't understand what it says, that you're not an attorney.
Hmm.
But it's something, especially elderly, they have poor vision, maybe they don't have the readers with them or and so forth like that. And if they want you to read that to them, as long as you read it verbatim, word for word, what's there,
Yeah.
you should be fine with that. You're not giving a legal interpretation of what the document says. But then if they start asking questions like, well, does this mean that then no, you need to
Yeah.
stop right
Yeah.
there, and that's the attorney's job.
Yeah, because then this was like, well, what happens if, whatever, what about this other heir? What about this person? Like, will they have access? And I was like, This is out of my
Yeah,
scope."
exactly.
So then I basically was like, okay, at this point, I can't go through with the notarization. And so then I just had to leave. And that was very uncomfortable because there was someone that was literally standing over me saying to sign, which it was like almost out of a movie where I was like, I cannot believe that that just happened. But it does happen. But you just stand in your strength and then just get out of there. I had to call the vendor that contacted me and I was like, hey, so this wasn't going to be legal if I was going to do this. And she's like, okay, that's fine. I'll give you a print free fee and we're going to flag it. And I was like, okay. So yeah, I mean, it is scary though, especially if you are a bit of a people pleaser like I am, where I'm like, okay, yeah, this is fine. You cannot
Oh,
do that.
yes,
You
absolutely.
cannot do that as a notary that you honestly you really just have to put your foot down and be like, this is not happening today. So I wanted to thank you as well. The other thing that I also wanted to highlight is that there are different statutes depending on the states. So
Yes.
for Colorado, especially if you're watching that from Colorado, look into that because I believe that there is just a state law that passed that said that you could do estate planning as a remote online notary, but you have to research that yourself. Also, I think that New York has some specifics that have to do with estate planning as well. So if you are in New York, go ahead and look that up just to make sure that you are up to date. So there's always going to be other updates. So make sure that you are checking your state statutes. You should be able to sign up for the newsletter or like updates that send out just so that way you can't just be like, oh, I didn't get that email if you happen to do something incorrectly. So make sure that you,
And I just looked it up just now, and if Google's right, it's currently right now 45 states allow remote notarizations of wills.
yeah.
So if that's true and Google's correct on that, usually general notary work and closings, loan signings, and so forth like that, all kind of enumerate underneath your same statutes.
Mhm.
But be specific when you're dealing with wills and powers of attorneys. We're really going through your state laws because they tend to put those in a separate section or a separate area to deal with those specific types of remotarizations separately. And they might like Florida does the same thing. Pretty much everything, all the general notary work falls under a certain section of Chapter 117. But wills and doing remote notarizations for wills, they've got their own little section, their own little bank that they're in that deals specifically with vulnerable adults. So just make sure you're looking through those statutes in your respected states
Mhm.
thoroughly.
Yes. Jay, I wanted to thank you very much for sitting through and doing this interview with me. I think that it's obviously something that we both feel very strongly about,
Yep.
especially within our community. So it's not just something that you can be laissez-faire about. It has severe consequences both to you and what your document is notarizing and for those people and for those families. So, if there's anyone that wants to reach out to work with you directly, how do they find you?
If you want to reach out to me, you can email me at j@jm, that's J as in John, M as in Mary, signingservices.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Take care.